Welcome to my channel. Today's scary story comes from a viewer. It was late, sometime past midnight. I was driving down a back road in rural Pennsylvania. It was a road I hadn't driven before. I had taken a wrong turn somewhere and ended up on this narrow road lined with very tall trees on either side of me. And the trees were so close together that they almost made a tunnel over the road. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a woman standing by the side of the road. I slowed down, and I realized she was wearing a pale white dress. She looked like she was in her early 20s. She didn't appear to be hurt or anything, but she was just standing there. And as I got closer, I saw that she had her thumb out like she was hitchhiking. I honestly didn't want to stop and pick her up, but something about the way she was standing there, it kind of looked like she was lost, and she definitely looked a bit desperate. And also, it was late, and I didn't want her to be walking along this dark road alone. So I hesitated for a second, but then I just decided to pull over and let her in. When she climbed in, she didn't say a word. Her skin was freezing cold, but she seemed to be okay. She just sat there quietly for a minute while I drove. And then, after a while, she finally spoke. She said, "Thank you. My house isn't far." She told me to turn onto a dirt road. She gave me directions. She said to keep going straight and then take the next left, and then it would be the first house on the right. And I remember thinking how strange it was that she knew exactly where she wanted to go. We wound through these super curvy roads, and the trees just kept getting thicker and taller and bigger until it felt like the road itself was being swallowed by the woods. And the further we went, the more my stomach clenched, because I just had this feeling that I was making a huge mistake, but I tried to push it out of my mind. Finally, we reached the end of the road, and there in front of us was an old farmhouse. All of the windows were dark and boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. There wasn't even a light on. It looked completely empty. She turned to me and she gave me a small smile and she said, "This is where I get out." I watched her climb out of my car and walk slowly up the porch. And as I sat there in my car, I saw the faint glow of her figure slowly disappear into the darkness inside the house. I pulled out of there and I drove back to the main road and I sped all the way home. The next day something just nagged at me, so I decided I had to go back to that house and at least see what was going on. I found the address and I looked it up, and it turns out the girl had given me the right directions. This house really was hers. I drove back to the house. I slowed down and I noticed that the house was completely boarded up now. There were weeds growing up through the steps on the porch. No lights were on. It looked like no one had lived there in a long time. But then I remembered that this road was super old and it was probably a dead end. And I remembered there being a neighbor's house just down the road a little bit. So I figured maybe if I knocked on their door, someone might be able to tell me what happened to that girl. So I walked up to the neighbor's house and I knocked on the door, and an old man answered. I asked him if he knew what had happened to the girl who lived in the White House, and he looked at me for a moment and he kind of frowned. And he looked back at the house and he said, "You're not the first person to ask me that question. A girl in a white dress died on that road 30 years ago. She was in a car accident. They say she was walking along that road at night and a drunk driver hit her and killed her. People still pick her up sometimes." And I remember sitting in my car in the driveway of that house, and I felt the hair on my arms stand up, and I could have sworn that the seat beside me was freezing cold. Thanks for watching. If you like this channel, be sure to check out my podcast. Thanks.
I used to think the scariest thing about living alone was the silence. I was wrong. The scariest thing is realizing you're not as alone as you thought. For the past 3 years, I've been living in a rambling old farmhouse that's seen better days. It's a beautiful place. Just needs a lot of work. I bought it at a foreclosure auction for a steal. All the other bidders passed on it, likely because of how much work it needs, plus the fact that it's in the middle of nowhere. No phone service, no internet. Cell service is spotty at best. It's only when I moved in that I realized just how far out in the sticks it really is, but I didn't care. I liked the isolation. I needed the isolation. After the divorce, I just needed some time to myself. I needed to be away from people. To be clear, I wasn't running from anything or anyone. I just needed some space, some time to heal, to get my life back on track. So I packed up what was left of my life, and I moved into my new home. At first, it was great. I explored the rooms, took measurements, made plans, then reality set in. It was just me, the mice, and the dust. And yes, there was definitely an unsettling feeling to the silence, but I could live with that. What I couldn't live with was the creeping feeling that I wasn't alone. It started with little things. Groceries seemed to disappear faster than usual. Milk would spoil in the fridge before I could drink it. Food I swore I'd put away would go missing from the pantry. Sometimes I'd find cabinet doors open that I'd closed. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just tired from work. Work was crazy busy. I was exhausted. I barely had the energy to cook for myself, let alone entertain company. Plus, the house is huge. There are dozens of rooms, many of which I haven't even opened yet. I told myself it had to be raccoons. The house is old. There are definitely some gaps around the windows and doors. Raccoons make their way in. I told myself that to convince myself that everything was okay, that I was okay. But then came the noises. At night, when the house was still, I'd hear faint thuds from above. Like someone crawling, dragging, someone heavy. My house didn't have an upstairs. It was a small attic crawl space accessible only by a hatch in the ceiling of the spare bedroom. I tried to ignore the sounds, but they persisted. Slow and deliberate, like someone kneeling, dragging themselves closer. I told myself it had to be raccoons. But deep down I knew it wasn't. I'd never heard raccoons dragging themselves across the floor. And if it was raccoons, why did they stop at the bedroom? Why didn't they move further into the house? One night I stayed awake listening. The sound came again, slow and deliberate, like knees shuffling across wood. I held my breath, straining to listen. Whatever was up there stopped, then silence. Waited, listening to my own breathing. The house creaked, the wind sighed through the trees. Then I heard it again, a thump, then dragging. I sat frozen until the first light of dawn crept through the window. I told myself I had to get help. I called the police. But when they arrived, they found nothing. They suggested I board up the attic hatch and just forget about it, so I did. That night I lay in bed, every creak of the old house making my chest tighten. Around 2 a.m. I heard it again, the soft crawl. But this time, it wasn't above me. It was right outside my bedroom door.
I always knew there was something off about the spare room in my apartment. The landlord called it unusable storage space and told me to keep it locked. But the key was already in the door when I moved in, hanging from a tarnished brass ring. For months, I never touched it. The door stayed shut, paint peeling around the frame, and a faint draft seeping through the crack at the bottom. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear faint sounds from inside like fabric shifting, or someone dragging their fingertips lightly across the wall. I told myself it was just the building settling. Old wood and thin walls, that's all. But one evening, I came home and noticed the door was open just slightly, maybe an inch. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I hadn't closed it all the way before. The air coming from inside was cold, damp, like a basement. My lights flickered as I reached for the knob. Inside was nothing but shadows. The room was smaller than I expected. The walls bare, except for strange scratches that covered the plaster. Some were shallow, but others dug deep, like someone had clawed at them for years. There was no furniture, no window, nothing but the smell of mildew and dust. I should have closed the door and walked away, but I didn't. I stepped inside. The second my foot crossed the threshold, the air felt heavier. My ears popped like I'd gone underwater, and then I heard it. A low, ragged breath coming from the far corner. I snapped my head around, but the shadows swallowed everything. I backed out of the room and slammed the door shut, locking it fast. My hands shook for an hour. Before I could even set the key down, I didn't open it again, not after that night. But things changed in the apartment. The draft under the door grew stronger. My belongings shifted when I wasn't home. Small things. It's like a mug facing the wrong way, or my shoes lined up differently by the mat. At night, I'd wake up to faint knocking, not at my door. From inside the walls. 2 weeks ago, I came home late and found a note slipped under the locked room's door. Just one line, scrawled in uneven handwriting. Asterisk. Thank you for letting me out. I first noticed the folded paper under my windshield wiper on a rainy Thursday night. At first, I thought it was just a flyer, but when I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. It simply read, "Asterisk, I like the way you smile when you think no one is watching." At the time, I brushed it off as a creepy coincidence. Maybe some weirdo had seen me at work and thought this was a joke. But as the days went by, more notes started showing up. They were always handwritten, always folded the same way, and always left in places I couldn't explain. One was taped to my apartment door. Another slipped under the mat where I never would have seen it if I had Dan T tripped on the corner. The words were short, unsettling, and specific. Asterisk, you hum when you cook pasta. Asterisk, you left your bathroom light on again last night. That last one stopped me cold. My bathroom window faced the alley, second floor up. The only way someone could see in was if they stood directly in the shadows below. I started checking my locks 3 times before bed, sliding a chair under the doorknob like something out of a movie. I told myself it had to be some sick prank from someone I knew, maybe a coworker. But every time I tried to match the handwriting in my mind to someone in my life, I came up blank. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something tapping slow. Deliberate taps against my living room window. My heart hammered as I sat up in bed, straining to listen. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. After what felt like forever, it stopped. The next morning, I found another note slipped under my door. Asterisk, you look cute when you re-scared. That was the first time I called the police. I showed them the notes, explained the tapping, the details about my private life that no one should know. They sent an officer who walked through my place, checked the alley, and told me it was probably just some neighborhood kid messing around. He suggested a security camera and left it at that. So I bought one of those cheap doorbell cameras and stuck it inside facing the door. It felt like a safety net, but deep down, I knew it wasn't enough. The notes kept coming, like clockwork. Some were almost taunting. Asterisk, you missed a spot shaving. Blue really is your color. You shouldn't drink so late at night. Each one was more invasive than the last. Someone wasn't just watching me, they were studying me. The breaking point came last week. I was heading out for work, and when I pulled my jacket off the hook, a folded slip of paper fluttered to the floor. My hands shook as I opened it. The note said, Asterisk, don't go to work today. My knees went weak. They had been inside my apartment. I didn't go to work. I sat on the couch all day with every light on, gripping the heaviest kitchen knife I owned, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. No knocks, no notes, no sounds in the alley. Just silence that stretched on until it became unbearable. That night, I checked the footage from the camera. Hours of nothing until around 3:14 a.m. That's when the motion alert flickered on. The screen showed my front door, dark and quiet. Then, slowly, a figure leaned into view from the side of the frame. I couldn't make out his face, but I saw the outline of his body, the curve of his head as he bent down and placed something under the crack of my door. And then he looked up, directly into the camera. I froze, staring at the grainy image as he smiled. Not a big grin, but a small, knowing curl of his mouth, as if to say he was aware of everything I was doing. He stood there for another 10 seconds before walking out of frame. I didn't sleep after that. The police came again when I showed them the footage. They promised to increase patrols in my area, but I could tell by the look on the officer's face that he didn't think they'd decatch him. The man was careful, too careful. Last night, I found the newest note. It wasn't on my door or my car or tucked anywhere I'd find it by chance. No, this one was on my pillow, neatly folded, waiting for me when I came out of the shower. My chest went cold as I unfolded it with trembling hands. Just 6 words, written in that same familiar hand. Asterisk, I'm closer than you think.